So you know me, I don't care about the PerspectiveBots. As far as I'm concerned, they're just the most nothing combiner team. I don't know why, they're just boring to me. But I mean, it's MMC, and once again, they've descended from on high to grace us with a figure conceived from within such an immaculate mind that our reality buckles to contain it. A piece of such radiant quality, one can scarcely comprehend its majesty, so divine in its engineering and construction that the mortal intellect just balks at grasping its unbridled glory. A gift upon the world of such peerless, fathomless perfection in its every facet, with no fault to be found, that even unbelievers may find themselves calling MMC the gods that they are. It is without weakness, it is without mediocrity, it is nothing but strength upon strength. All that is to say, and giving it away early, it good. Buy it. It's Mastermind Creations' First Aid. Oh, I needed this. As much as I might be known as the harsh critic who hates too many things, I did not enjoy this year starting with a long series of negative to mediocre reviews. It's fun to do those every now and then. Well, the negative ones at least. The mediocre ones are kind of always a bit weak to do. But I am so happy to do a completely, overwhelmingly positive video for the first time in a while. And let me tell you, since this thing showed up, I have not been able to keep my hands off it. And you may ask how I afforded this, considering I currently desperately need to conserve my money. Well, you see, I'm only a man, and it was MMC, I was weak! And it's also MMC, so literally everything about this is amazing, including the price. It constantly baffles me how MMC can consistently put out one of the best products on the market and then also charge the lowest prices of any of the companies. Everything MMC does always puts on full display that they respect their customers more than any other company. Their figures are always engineered to the best of their ability, their articulation is always top-notch, their quality is always top tier, and their prices are always the best in the business. And yet, Fans Toys is the one with the cult. And the respect from MMC always comes down even into the boxes. Look at this. This is the box for a masterpiece scale product. It is in essence the size of an official Chug Deluxe box. For reference, here's the box for the Magic Square Optimus Prime, and this is already one of the more reasonably sized third-party boxes. MMC respects the storage space of the people who like to keep the boxes. It's such a minor thing, but it's so refreshing. One thing that is very strange about this box is that the stats on the back are not the same stats that are on the card. The stats on the card read like nonsense they took off his dating profile. 10 strength, 10 endurance, 8 intelligence, 8 speed, 9 courage, and then rank, firepower, and skill are all 7. Motherfucker, if these are your stats, why aren't you leading the Autobots? Who gave this man a 7 in firepower when he comes with the most pathetic pea shooter ever put to plastic? Then you read the back of the box and it feels like it's written by someone who hated him. His stats average below a 5. How are these two this different? Anyways, enough about the box. None of you care about it. Let's talk about the figure. And damn, this thing looks good and clean. I know that there's a contingent of people out there who don't like the G1 look. Some of that is the fact that they are sick of G1ers being dicks about the rest of the franchise, so they are pushing back on the things that G1ers like. And some of that is that there are people for whom this just looks boring. And I can understand that point of view. I have seen figures that have taken G1 accuracy so far that the surfaces look bland. And while this thing is very smooth and incredibly G1 accurate, there is just enough going on here to liven up the sculpt. A lot of that is the transformation hinges adding some extra detail, but they manage to look purposeful and interesting. And despite the fact that this has a relatively complex transformation that's doing a ton, this manages to look so unbridled with it. Just looking at it, you have no idea how much this is going to do during transformation. How MMC manages to move mountains in the conversion yet keep the look locked down is beyond me. There's little to say about this other than just look at it. Its First Aid brought gloriously to life with so few flaws they hardly bear mentioning. Like, it's incredible that a figure tasked with so much achieves it all so well, and yet also is basically devoid of voids. There's almost nothing even approaching a gap on this guy. The sculpt and the proportions work in synchronous concert to render a figure that always looks cool. It's First Aid, a character who's supposed to be a dweeby pacifist, but this figure is imbued with such confidence he looks like an absolute grill cruncher. Helps that his head is about the size of his bicep. Seriously, do anything with these arms and he looks like he's ready to go. For a dude without a face, he sure is expressive. If I had any complaints about the look of this mode, it's that while his shins are supposed to be pretty deep, these are perhaps a bit excessive. And he has these mirrored holes on his arms, so while from a lot of angles they look fine, if you catch them head on, however, you can see clear through him. Moving on to his face sculpt, and there's really not much to say other than faceplates always look cool. But this figure still manages to also look kind of innocent despite it. It's probably something to do with the visor that manages to be both big and round-eyed at the same time despite being square. But this face is just imbued with his personality to an admirable degree. First Aid is the only member of the PerspectiveBots I have any personal fondness for, and the look of this does him so much justice. It captures him precisely, while instilling him with a degree of cool factor that I wasn't expecting. It's an absolute masterpiece of a sculpt, and if it were the only thing this figure had going for it, it would be worth recommending him for on its own. But this has many other amazing qualities on top of that. The accessories ain't one of them, because you've already seen them all. Outside the red translucent strip you use to decode the tech specs on the back of the box, the only thing he comes with is his gun. This is one of the most paltry pistols perhaps ever. Just an inherent and desperate lack of balls on this thing, which is funny because more than anything it resembles a penis. Gotta get some truck nuts for this gun. Nah, that would just make it even more sad. It folds in half at the handle, and I have yet to figure out why. So yeah, the accessories on this guy are not his strong suit. But that's okay. When the rest of the cake is so good, what does it matter when there isn't a ton of icing on top of it? Posability on this is great, better than the average masterpiece, and if this could become the baseline for what we consider acceptable going forward, I'd love that. Head has way more than average range in general, but he has an extraordinary amount of upwards tilt. Good for looking at titans he needs to repair, or enemy combiners he can't quite fight yet without his bros. Too bad he can't fly, because this would be perfect for that. No butterfly, but you can get his arms across his chest, though it requires you to drop the wheels down to their lower positions. It functions, but it's a workaround. He has two separate shoulder joints, one that gets him out to a 90 without looking like Rodimus, and a second that when used together with the first gets his arms straight up. And you can even cheat it for what I guess I have to call maximum shoulder, maximum elbows. Hands swivel, and you can cheat them for sword-wielding wrists. Individual fingers, though the sculpt on them is a bit goofy. Extreme ab crunch. Legs kick forward and out to the side just fine, but backwards is a little restricted. 2 different thigh swivels, 90 knees, and feet with a monster pivot and tons of tilt up. So yeah, great posing. Nothing is below standard and almost everything is above it. It's got a few specialty joints. The only way to improve this is to give it yet more specialty joints. And everything is so perfectly toleranced. There is nothing loose on this guy and nothing is unpleasantly over tight. I mean, almost everything on it is probably over tight, but like barely. It's enough to say that yes, you probably have to use more force than should be necessary to move anything, but it's never uncomfortable or worrisome. And honestly, making everything just slightly too tight is probably a benefit considering what this has to do as a member of a combiner team. Transformation is yet another amazing aspect of this figure. I absolutely love this process. It does a lot, but there is nothing needlessly complex about this conversion. I'd honestly rank this as just an incredibly clever journeyman transformation, as in you'd have to know a thing or two about Transformers to find it easy, but the amount of engineering chops it took to do this is something to behold. Once again, MMC manages to make a figure that basically achieves perfection through remarkably simple means. Without directions, there was not one thing that stumped me for even a second on the first run-through of this transformation. It is sublime. And a masterpiece transformation I can honestly flip back and forth between just for fun. While most masterpiece conversions aren't cancerous or anything, ones like this are relatively rare. And now I have to confess that I may have been exaggerating just a tad at the start of the video, as the end result of this reminds us that while MMC may be gods, they are mortal ones, because the alt mode finally reveals a crack in the marble of this divine sculpture. It is on the razor's edge of being perfect, and yet it falls off that edge and shatters on the ground because there is just no finishing this transformation. It is physically impossible to get it to tab together properly. MMC seems to have made a catastrophic error in tolerances and a mistake in how they chose to handle the tabs. See, this entire back half is being held together exclusively through friction tabs, when this desperately needed to hook together or use some locking tabs. The problem being is that all the tolerances in this area are like 1% out of whack, with all the tabs, of which likely there are too many, being what seems to be barely larger than the ports they're supposed to slot into. The result is that these ports squeeze all the tabs back out. The amount of force they seem to be exerting is minimal, and it largely has to do with the thighs being housed within the rear. But the ultimate result is that I have done everything that I can, and the back always splits wide open down its seams. Such a tragedy. Even more so when you realize just how good this mode would be without those problems. It rolls smoothly, while not freely, the sculpt is nice, the paint is immaculate, the bottoms of the feet become internal parts, so no chance of scratched exposed surfaces, and how many true ambulance figures are there? This is my first not spaced one of these ever. It's just one of those nice generic 80s ambulances that don't exist anymore. Hopefully, later releases of this figure remedy these tolerance issues, but that all gives way to another cool conversion as you go through MMC's genius design to turn it into its arm mode. The brilliance of the fact that they were able to engineer 2 halves of a hand into the character's legs that combine is insane. And they even learned lessons from the last time, improving the new arm further than the Assaultus was ever able to do, starting by making it super easy to get out the comboner by just using the ab crunch to pop it out with no effort. And the arm mode is incredible, so fully cohesive it's a wonder that it turns into anything else. And without the thighs adding extra pressure, plus the limbs being locked together by the absolute genius half tracks utilized to give the elbow and wrist rotation, the lower half does not pop apart like in the ambulance mode. Seriously, the arm mode looks basically perfect. And while there are some people who are lamenting the loss of the Scramble City functionality on these MMC sets, I will say that it makes sense as it's already requiring miraculous engineering to get them this good, and the alternative is probably parts forming, something I'd gladly surrender swappable limbs to not have. But this does actually attach to the Bruticus if you flip the arm port the other way, so there's still a degree of interplay that you can get with this. This is likely the most inherently posable combiner limb of all time, though if you include figures with stuff like parts-forming hands, then this is probably the equal of those. Elbow bends more than a 90, with some of the most articulated hands of all time. Every finger has every joint, capable of bend, splay, and a mild level of inverse movement. Though the thumb is still mounted in a weird place that can look good and how you want, but you have to make it do that. And then, I've never seen anything quite like this before, but MMC absolutely cheats to include palm articulation on the hand. The knuckles are actually transforming to bend upwards, a brilliant if silly workaround to achieve that functionality, resulting in these hands only missing sword-wielding wrists. And there is just no two ways about it, this is an amazing figure. Even in spite of the problems its solo alt mode suffers, you can work with that until it at least looks tolerable. But otherwise, MMC has knocked yet another home run out of the park and into orbit. A figure that, were it not for a small few tolerance issues, would be perfect in every category. An awesome-looking, accurate robot, with every part being as posable as possible, 2 top-tier transformations, an ambulance among the most accurate to its ilk, and an arm as awesome-looking as it is articulate. There is not $1 wasted or overcharged, not an area of design where they failed to deliver. The worst thing about this is an alt mode otherwise perfect were it not for tolerances halting its seamless completion. And mark my words, that is an agonizing scar upon the face of this jaw-dropping figure, but it is one worth tolerating for everything else it brings to the table. If you have any interest in this figure at all, this is not one to miss. You will not regret picking it up. Honestly, you will forget its only problem. I know I do, I can't stop playing with this thing. It's a joy to handle, a thrill to transform, and a spectacle to look at. This is so much better than anything Masterpiece makes anymore, and I wholeheartedly recommend it. And that's not half of what I have to say, but it's enough of what I have to say. And I know you know what everyone else tells you to do at the end of these videos. So, if you liked what you saw here, please do that. And if you'd like to take it a step further, then please share this video with any friend you think may be interested. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me waste your time.